Good morning, everyone. We'll call this meeting of the Community and Economic Development Committee to order. Today is Thursday, December 14th. It's 9 a.m. and we're here at the training room at 4700 Elmore Road. And I am Assemblymember and Co-Chair George Martinez. We'll have Assemblymember introductions.
Kevin Cross.
Scott Myers.
Randy Soul.
And are there any members on the phone at this point? Not hearing any members on the phone, and we are also joined by staff, and I'll ask everyone as you have the opportunity to participate today to please make sure you identify yourself for the record, your name and your position, and we'll begin with our three main items of unfinished business, and then we'll have a little discussion about our legislative priorities and priorities for the next year toward the end of our meeting. But we'll open it up with the two kind of parallel actions that are before the Assembly, and that is AO 2023-117 and AO 2023-118, and these have to do with local changes to titles to conform with state changes to the similar areas of code. And so we are now referred to the second meeting of the Community Economic Development Committee for this action. And we will, this is scheduled for the next Assembly meeting for debate on January 9th, our next Assembly meeting. So today, this is our second meeting here. We've heard from some others thus far who came to our first meeting about this. And so at this point, I'll open the conversation to any members of the audience who are here to speak on those items. I see a couple folks in the audience, so anybody's here to speak on item A or B, we'll open up that conversation, and then we'll have any questions from members and from staff. So are you all ready to come up and say hello to us?
Who's here to present on AO 2023-117? Title 10.
Cool. So anyone who's willing to come on up, just if you wouldn't mind coming to the front table. So we are recording on a device in the front, so we can project. Just say your name, who you are, and then.
Hi, my name is Nick Miller. My wife and I own Alaska Buds. We live in Chidiac. I'm also the chair of the Marijuana Control Board. I'm not sure that matters, but I figured I better say something. I'm here in support of these two items. Number one, it would bring the city in line with the state regulations. I guess there's several reasons I support them. The first is, we have a lot of, for better words, families come to our facilities. And unlike a liquor store, you can't bring your kids in. So unfortunately, a lot of people are leaving their kids in the vehicles, summer and winter, which sucks. And if we see it, we send someone out to, watch the car when we can, but we don't always see it. The other is convenience. Most businesses in Anchorage, in the state, compete against other licensed businesses. We're competing against them with a regulated market that will deliver it to their home. They'll deliver it to a parking lot somewhere and meet them. For me, it's a safety issue. It's a convenience issue. I should say the one thing that I was a little taken back by was, and I think we'll probably see some changes in the regulations again, that to have a delivery window, it should be a contiguous restricted access area. So I think what we're starting to see is people apply for licenses and they have a facility like a storefront, and then some are considering putting a hut in the parking lot for the drive-through. My personal opinion is that it should be a contiguous restricted access area and should only be allowed out of that store. That way you don't have someone transporting cash and cannabis back and forth between this hut and the parking lot. So I thought I would throw that in there. Like I said, I've been on the Marijuana Control Board for about 7 years. I've been the chair for the last couple of years. And if you guys have any questions, it's a tough business right now. And any way we can compete against the unregulated market is a benefit to us.
Any members with questions? Yes, Member Salt.
Yeah, just going off some of the feedback I've received. One, good idea around the elevator, so they don't forget the vehicle. And two was bad idea around, and it's kind of unrelated, but there was a concern of 21-year-olds coming in, buying product, and then selling it in schools or wherever to those that are underage. But again, I think that's unrelated to a drive-through or sampling.
I would agree. There's a robust, unregulated market. It's much cheaper than someone can buy it for in the store. I assume if people are selling it to minors, they're not purchasing it from us just because our overhead and taxes are so much. The sampling, I've heard a lot of complaints about, I don't want to have my staff tell people no, and I don't want to give it away. I guess my answer to that would be don't do it. We're not here to regulate your response to consumers. At least I don't believe the government should regulate that, right? It's a business decision. And like I said, our overhead and costs are so high. I don't suspect we're going to see a big, everybody's giving it away. I mean, they're barely making a living charging for it. So, and if they do give it all away, I assume they won't be around long.
What about the concern, I'll use an example of a kid with last name Salt, that when Subway had 3, 6, and she visited every Subway in town.
Well, I don't disagree, and it does happen today. The only difference is I charge them a penny. Sometimes we do birthday deals where someone comes in on their birthday, we give them a penny pre-roll. And you're right, they'll go to 6 places, 7 places. But it's happening today. And, yeah. So I haven't, I haven't seen any incidents other than, sometimes as a business owner, I might get a little irritated. But it is what it is. It's part of doing business.
Okay, thanks.
No question. Just to follow up, did you mention that the state is opening a project again to revisit the changes to drive-through to iron out some?
Yeah, and it's very hard to understand. Right now, everything behind the counter, and we'll say behind the wall, is a restricted access area. And once you step across that counter, it's not unrestricted anymore. And that restricted means that's where the marijuana stays until it's purchased. Unintended consequence here, some folks are applying for what I would say is a coffee hut in their parking lot. And then they're gonna make that a restricted access area, and that area behind the counter a restricted access area. And they would take it from the storefront out of the restricted access area to wherever this little hut is, which is back in the restricted access area. It poses some safety challenges, and I also think it poses some issues with AMCO when they come in to do an inventory. They don't want to be half of it's here and half of it's here. It's either all in one restricted access area. Now, those people who are applying can apply for a new license for that facility, right? That little drive-through hut. They're not prohibited from doing that, but the board did open a regulations project, and I assume that's going to move forward, but I have no idea.
Okay, that's good for the record, just to note that, one of our kind of fuels behind this is to bring the municipalities potentially in, to conform with the state regs. So if there are changes coming in, that's important for us to know on the record. Any other members?
As far as state regs, we can be more restricted than just I think that's important. So just because the state does that, we know that because we're right here in the state, we can't have that apply.
Home rule.
So, I guess my position on this, and maybe you can address your comment. I don't think we have an accessibility issue. I don't see anybody saying that, gosh, I couldn't get my weed today, or I couldn't, I don't think that's the problem. In fact, as far as access to alcohol and marijuana, you might argue the otherwise if you wander downtown long enough or you sit at an intersection with your window down. Right, so the question is going to be, is it, I don't know if there's necessarily an accessibility issue for it. And of course, the decision I would make would not be based on what's good for the industry, it has to be what's good for public safety. So I'm looking for any kind of empirical data or anything that shows me that drive-through marijuana, when used otherwise, did not result in worse public safety. Because Kenai just went through this and went through a long arduous process in October of this year and decided after analyzing the data that they were outlined. So I'm kind of curious what Kenai is, since they've been through this, what their deliberations were and why they chose to outlaw it, and why we're looking at making it legal here when the primary concern should be public safety, not accessibility.
And can I respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Please, thank you.
And it, I guess I didn't say anything about accessibility. My concerns were public safety and convenience, right? And like I said, when you drive to the liquor store, you can grab your toddler and take them into the liquor store and purchase whatever you want. When you pull up to a marijuana facility, you leave your toddler in the car. It's that simple. And, you know, we can all say they're horrible parents, they do bad things, but they do it. They do it. It is what it is, right? And liquor stores aren't competing against a well-organized, unregulated delivery system service, right? I can call 5 places right now and have it delivered right to this building, right? That's convenience. So, and we do have people who are making the choice not to stop and leave their kids in the vehicle, but then they call for the delivery service. You know, and for me, that's a safety issue. I mean, it's been a couple of years, but I think it was 2.5 years ago, a guy got shot up on Government Hill by a delivery service. Well, the delivery guy got shot, not the person who ordered it. So it's, you know, competition is tough among regulated business owners. It's, you know, merciless against someone who's unregulated, not paying taxes, doesn't check IDs, doesn't do anything that we do. And, you know, that's my main reason for doing this is, number one, kids in the car because I get tired of seeing it. And number two, it is convenience, right? If they can go through a drive-through and get it before they go home, at least they know it's tested. At least somebody's getting some taxes. And, you know, we are making a little money. But like I said, you know, no one else I know is competing against someone who has no rules, who has no taxes. They just really do whatever they want to do. And I know it's against the law, but let's be honest, when was the last time we saw a marijuana crime prosecuted? There's no desire to prosecute marijuana offenses. So, and I don't know what Kenai debated. I wish I would have listened.
Oh yeah, well, thank you. And I know there are other folks here to come, so if you are here to speak on these items, stick around, there may be some additional questions, but yeah, if you are here to speak on this item, please come to the front table here. Introduce yourself to the record, and we'd love to hear from you.
Hello, good morning. My name is Ivy Anderson from Cannabis. And I would like to address some of the public safety concerns that have been brought up. I know previously mentioned about minors in the car. We have a problem with that. We even had an instance where someone left their child in the car, the child ran out, the woman was dragging the child across the parking lot trying to get her back into the car. Of course, we called the police. We turned over the recording and there was some kind of police action against her for that, for the people that are going through. We've been a victim of armed robbery. If we had a drive-through, we'd be able to close our doors and have just the drive-through. Go through, keeps our employees safe and the people safe. People have talked about comparing tobacco and alcohol to marijuana. Marijuana is much more highly regulated, and they brought up DUIs being impaired. Well, people, regardless if they go into the store or they go through a drive-through, they're going to do what they do. I mean, you can see them in their cars as soon as they get in, consume the product, which of course we discourage that. We don't want to see that. for that. And then they talked about minors going through the drive-through. I think the budtenders and the dispensaries are very highly trained on how to notice a fake ID, tell them to take off their hoodie and make sure that they are 21. The dispensaries don't want to lose their license, budtenders don't want to lose their handler's cards. So those are my thoughts.
Any questions? So I have a question, and it may be either one, just the actual implementation question, they go back to AK West as well, or AMCO West. There are essentially three elements to these two legislative items that we're looking at. There's internet telephone sales, there's samples, and then there's drive-throughs. It seems like they're all connected, but they may all be, I think, evaluated independently. And I think that's a fair approach. How is this working now? In fact, in other places, if it is at all working, any of these elements, whether it's internet sales and drive-throughs, are there any data points at this point anywhere that give us operational insights to the way it's working and rolling out already, aside from the change with the coffee hut?
Right. I do know that there's 18 other states who allow dispensary drive-throughs at this time, so it must be working in those states if they're continuing as of June 2023. And
Not necessarily.
my thought on the samples is you could sell something for a penny. So if someone really wants to give out a sample, they could do it now. Give me a penny, here's your sample. So you can give it free or you can give it for a penny. It really doesn't make a difference. People can do it now. I know we probably wouldn't do it even if you allowed it, for the same fact that it just costs you too much money to give something away for free.
Any questions from any members of this council? Is there anyone else here to speak on this item or these items? All right. Anyone on?
Hey, George, this is Will Schneider
Speak on
from
these items?
Catalyst Cannabis Company on the phone.
You want to repeat that, please?
Yeah, this is Will Schneider from Catalyst Cannabis Company. I'm on the phone. I don't know if you guys can hear me. We're having a hard time hearing everybody on the phone on the call-in line, but I can probably chime in a couple comments as well.
The floor is yours, Will. You have 3 minutes for comments on this.
Great, thanks, guys. I just want to reiterate some of the points that I made the last economic development meeting. We do offer these services in other industries, like the pharmaceutical industry, which I'd be looking at carefully. We do offer that as an accessibility thing, as was mentioned by one person, because it is a little bit easier for some patrons to go through a drive-thru than it is to come to the store. I think a lot of the public safety concerns can be wiped out, because I think people are going to be really on the impairment, the IDing, the making sure minors aren't in the car. There's probably additional regulations we could add around the minors, or even with the potentially type of packaging or like some tamper-proof. When we make deliveries, for example, to other marijuana facilities, we have to have tamper-resistant, locks on there. So having certain types of tapes on there so people can will be evident when they have open packaging if they were to get pulled over, to decrease the likelihood of people opening packaging, in the car. I think all around it's a good move. We also have to kind of stop comparing it to alcohol a little bit. There's a brown jug right across from Windler Middle School on Lake Otis. We don't have those opportunities in the marijuana industry, and so we have a totally different set. We keep on saying it's the same as alcohol, but it's not really the same as alcohol. And we don't treat it the same as alcohol. It's treated pretty harshly and pretty hard in the industry in terms of regulations. So I think it's we need to give the marijuana industry a really, an analytical look from an independent eye, and not looking through the lens of the alcohol industry. And they also aren't the same level of impairment. I'm not advocating for any type of drunk driving or impaired driving, but they're not the same drug also. I do believe, and Nick, if I think I heard you there at the table, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe there are already operational drive-throughs within the state of Alaska. I do believe there's operating in Juneau and Fairbanks, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong about that. And Nick might be able to provide some additional data from there. And so, I will continue to advocate for drive-throughs. I think, it's progress for the industry. It's a level of acceptance that we still haven't gotten as we're getting shamed into, getting pushed into very hard regulated spots. The market's becoming very competitive for people. There's going to be lots of, and again, it doesn't have to be a measure for the marijuana industry. I agree that it should be a measure for public safety. But I think this all adds to public safety. We have a store on Muldoon where at 10 o'clock we go to a walk-up only window where people can only order from our lobby for security of our patrons, for security of our staff, and for security of our merchandise. And so we rarely have an incident, but we really like this methodology because we can secure the whole store with very little employee requirements. We view drive-throughs very similar, just like Nick was saying, that, we have the ability to regulate it easier. We can, or away from cannabis, excuse me. We can regulate it easier. We can close our doors. We can make it easier for our employees actually to regulate and to monitor customers. So I appreciate you guys' time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Will. We appreciate the commentary. Any other?
I would just like to make, and I'm not sure how relevant this comment is going to be, but just to be clear,
There are internet and phone orders being taken now, and I think that's just bringing the regulations into line with what's happening. If you look at any dispensary on Leaf Maps or Leafly, you can do an online order. It's been going on since the inception, since the first store opened. So, to me, it's a little misleading because we're already, everyone in the industry who has a retail store accepts online orders or even phone call orders, and then they're coming in. The only difference is they have to come into the facility to pick it up this time. And so, hopefully, once the drive-throughs get approved, we can deliver through that window.
So just to be clear, online sales is different than internet orders. Right? Like you can order it and you still have to go to
Yeah.
the shop and go pick it up and pay in cash.
Yes.
Yeah, so are we also contemplating, and is there at the ample level, online sales, making a purchase online and then just to pick up, or do you still have to go to the cash to pay the actual transactions in person?
We're a cash business. We can't be, we cannot be, we can't accept credit cards. We can't accept really anything. So, but I just wanted to make that clarification because it's always been confusing to me. I see that in the regulations on and off, but at the end of the day, people have been accepting online orders and over the phone orders. It's just the consumer has to, try to get this and leave the option inside.
Just
just want to check, there's no plans for July to take that online or phone sales going to deliver that.
That is, I have not heard that.
Just curiosity.
Yeah.
At least what was described as not in the formal businesses at this point. In what you described as kind of the black market. That still exists, you still can find out.
Oh, it's definitely happening.
Thank you for your comments. I'll just add a little flavor to it because I think these are important questions for us to have. We are now taxing at the level of investing the marijuana sales tax into early childhood education, which is, we relate to that party, but it's a good news that we're there. To Member Cross's point, we have home rule, and so we don't necessarily have to follow the state guidelines, and we want to follow what's best for Anchorage, what's best for the public service for here. I've heard a few different things, so I just want to put them on the record. I've heard, and not just today, but in emails and in other conversations, that there are security questions that have been raised, will raise them. It was raised by Cannabis with respect to locking down and the amount of staff it takes to lock down the facility and making those sales available. So I think there's that element that I've heard. I've also heard the element of children in the car. Let me turn it on its head and say it in a different way. Right now, from my understanding, a person gets out of their vehicle, goes into a marijuana establishment, and it's at that point that the ID is checked. But who's in the car? Well, it was described that if a family person brings their children, there's a concern. But my question is, what if there are 3 teens in the car today? Who checks who's in the car today, in fact, so that the 21-year-old who's able to go into the store, they're bringing it back to the car of teens? Is that something that is possible today? I think it happens. And more importantly, are we considering that if a drive-through is established, that the regulations would be to ID the entire car? If we're considering that a regulation would be, you can't make that transaction unless every person in the car is identified, and then if it's your child, it's your child. But I personally have seen cars parked with others inside the car, and I have no clue who they are and what they're getting. And I personally have found, because I have a teenager, the remnants of stuff in the streets making its way forward, right? And so I'm interested in how we lock down a little more control as well, so that it doesn't fall as far into the underage hands as I see it happening now with what we have established today. So there's an element that I'm interested in with respect to the safety and the tightening up the opportunity to distribute outwardly. So there's an element that I've heard and I'm tracking as well, just from that vantage point. All the other stuff is subjective, what people feel about medicinal purposes, the comparisons to alcohol. I think there's a lot of great debate around those. But for me, I think this really is about how do we ensure better operation at the street level? How do we make sure that underage folks are not getting their hands so easily? And if there's things we can do for that. And I've also heard about, from seniors and from people who have mobility issues, there's an interest in having that convenience as it was described as well. So those are the elements that I've heard. I've also heard fears and concerns about just turning our city into a city of junkies because marijuana is the gateway drug. So concerns all across the board. I wanted to acknowledge those things that we're hearing, and I wanted to encourage any member of the public that will listen to this to continue to send your emails to us, make the phone calls to the assembly. We are deliberating this, and this will come back before the assembly on the 9th, I believe, of January. So if there are no other member comments at this point, any other people here to talk about this, then we'll move on to our next one.
One update, I know that we, another meeting, public safety meeting in the whole that was canceled last week, due to the annual conference and, the next meeting was until January 10th, but we might be moving it up, and so maybe realize that this is going to be just a public safety, it's a public safety issue. We can get a meeting in before the January 9th date, maybe just how we discuss this at that meeting.
And to remember the first one, I think that would be great because I'd also really want to put a clarity to the data about safety, about security, because part of our job is to help bring information forward to the public to clear up misconceptions and to the bottom. Member of the row.
Yeah, just briefly, I would be curious to know what the state regulations are now, so maybe that could be part of the next committee meeting around sampling and some of these other things. So not the whole packet, but just what is the language now, because I don't really know that, and so it's hard to compare, and like you said, we don't have to just follow the state, but I think that would be useful, because then if there isn't, a sampling, maybe there are limits we want to put that aren't in there, or maybe there are already limits that we're just not talking about, so I think that'd be helpful. Just a request from the sponsors.
And a staff member, Mandy Honest, has described that they have some information they will forward to you. Yes, please identify yourself.
So I'm staff. I'm Elizabeth Avery. I'm a senior planner department. I was just listening to the Heights there's discussion of some of the like a hot mill coffee shop. I was reading through this and I hadn't thought of that. I guess I just want to make sure I have it correct. That is something that would be a future consideration, or is that allowed by this?
Yeah, that would be the question to Nick Amco, so if you have a comment on it.
I would say, based on the AMCO regulations, and I'm here to support it for my business and myself, not AMCO. So based on the AMCO regulations, if the board so chose to approve a license like that, yes. You could have a small coffee hut. And I assume those are probably popular in some locations
Yeah,
of the
that's what I'm
states.
asking.
But I'm not sure it's really able to happen in Anchorage, but I'm also sure that they have to go through the planning and permitting.
Yeah.
So, you know, whether it will be allowed there or not, I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have a question, Dean?
Oh, not exactly a question. I was going to comment on a couple of things. One was that Mr. Cross and Mr. Martin was so correct in how you stated that as a whole rule, we can't be anything or one state that we can't be less restrictive, we can be more restrictive. So what this ordinance does is make us align with state regulation to be more restrictive now, or we don't have to do this at all, so that's the policy decision for law. That said, the sampling issue that's come up, and some comments I saw in entities and members were concerned about free samples being consumed on premises by Strawberry Seed. And I don't think anybody in this room is supposed to do that, but I just want to be clear, this doesn't change anything about on-site consumption. It's prohibited periods in our municipality. So you can consume on-site samples or whatever, it's still illegal even after this ordinance. And then Mr. Brown's question about sampling the state reg language. In drafting this, I looked at the state regulation and how they changed it. They simply took out the prohibition on sampling, and I didn't find anywhere where they actually addressed any sort of standards or limitations or anything. They just said free samples prohibited, believe the language, so it's not prohibited without any sort of regulation at all. And this does the same thing. So I think that all the packaging and quantity and all the other limits and requirements, labeling and so forth, would apply to free samples that are provided. So, if they wanted some special packaged, small-sized free samples, they still have to package, seal, and label, and all the information is required. That's how I see it. So, state regulation, yes, for Mrs. Brawley, there isn't any operating change. That doesn't mean that this ordinance, which just does the same thing, has to be that way. We can add some restrictions on free samples if you wanted, and we can make some more clarification.
Thank you, Dean, for the clarification. Having seen no, we're going to move on from this item. Again, this will be before the body on the 9th of January. So, the next item for our agenda is item C, because the first A and B are parallel. Item C goes to
I just want to make a note, anybody who's listening online, if you would go ahead and mute your phone, we occasionally get some backup feedback, so it would be great if you're listening online. Anybody who called in, just make sure your phone is muted. Thank you.
And so item C is peak season prep. What does that mean? Well, if you flip over this document, the agenda, on the other side is the annual list of committee legislative priorities for this year. And item H, which we're referencing today, was expedite permitting during peak season. Well, it seems like this may not be the peak season, but this is the season to get ready for the peak, it seems to me. And so knowing that we were coming into the end of the year, that we will start to have this committee look at what our priorities for this year are, I wanted to make sure that we begin this conversation today about where are we with respect to being ready for peak season, particularly as we look back on this item. It describes that this short staffing and vacancies was an issue that was identified last year with respect to expediting permitting during peak seasons and et cetera. So today we'll open up this conversation for review and update of item H and get a sense of where we are with respect to the peak season and any of the challenges. So on that front, Are there any members that would like to help us open this
Well,
conversation?
I don't see Lance or Ross who would probably speak more to how they're doing as far as filling positions, both at the permanent counter and various vacancies, and how they're doing as far as workforce. So I don't know I don't know if Dave wants to speak about how they're doing the planning, what they're anticipating.
I'd like to speak on
Scott
that.
Campbell. Scott,
We got a couple
go
of
ahead.
staff members there who will present the status of where they are. Yes, come, please, thank you. And just remember to identify yourself.
My name is Scott Campbell. I'm the Chief of Inspections with municipality. And yeah, right now we are, I would say, in a very tough situation. We are losing the head of our permit staff counter, Melissa Davidson. She is taking another position. She was offered higher pay. She was offered a better position, let's just say that, and she's taking it in January. We are also have had significant turnover at our permit counter for, since I've been here, July 5th, 2022. We also have labor shortages in our inspection department, our plumbing and mechanical specifically, and we are overwhelmed, to say the least, in our code abatement department. I know we have struggled to fill positions in the right of way as well.
So, I noticed I mentioned talk about HR and the speed at which we can hire people. Is that a problem, or is it you're not finding the candidates to fill the positions?
I think, there's multiple issues going on. I won't speak on behalf of HR, but what we've seen is often the qualification specs for some of these positions are pretty high. So we don't necessarily get to see all the applicants for these positions. They get vetted by HR, and HR throws these out before we even get to see them. That's concerning because these positions don't necessarily need to have a degree. They just need to be trainable people, and we need to get them in the building and train them. And we're not seeing some of those applicants come our way because HR throws them out because of the qualifications.
Who establishes the qualifications and who dictates those?
I don't know.
Building director?
It's a good HR question for you.
The position description does. So in order to change the minimum qualifications, you have to update the position description, which can be electronic.
Okay, and what is the process for updating that position description? Who would be in charge of that? Would it be the building official?
It would be the department, whoever is
Department.
overseeing that position.
Okay, so maybe that's something we can do to help and see if there's some way we can.
We also have an issue with retention. Often folks come in, specifically, I can use an example of, we had a permit tech this last year. He was very well qualified. He did a fantastic job. We tried to move him up a pay scale so we could keep him retained. He didn't have 1 year of enforcing Title 21. He had 8 months. He was our best candidate that we could promote, but because he didn't meet that 4-month gap, so we had his year, he could not apply for that position. So he moved on, and he, I believe, moved over in the dance world. So we lost a really good individual there. Not fair. So we definitely have a bottleneck in our permit counter. As far as the software, the online software,
Dynamic portal?
yeah, that thing it's a joke. I'm going to be honest with you. N4 does not work necessarily fluidly with the front counter and the inspection team. It never has since I've been here, and we continue to have problems with it. I don't know from the private contractor standpoint, but we continue to have issues with it to this day, and I just don't have a very, in my opinion, I don't feel like this software is going to be useful for us and the public. I think there's better options out there, and I think that needs to be explored. As far as our staffing shortages and on the inspection department, we recently, even this week, we unfortunately are down 2 inspectors because of health concerns and bereavement leave. We can't necessarily get to every single call, every single inspection, and when that happens, it's $1 waiting on a dime. you have major projects in this town where you have contractors that rely upon us to be there. And because of short staffing issues, we have to either force overtime to work these individuals, or we end up having to delay these projects because we just don't have the staff to show up. And then my last thing I wanted to really hit on is our code abatement team. We've always been understaffed. Since I've been here last year alone, we had, let's see here. Since I started here, we've had 1,425 code abatement cases. This calendar year, we have had 942 code abatement cases, and if you guys are not familiar with those, we have one in each one of your districts. They range mostly from dilapidated buildings to the weirdest of calls. We're the catch-all for the municipality. Currently, we have 4 individuals that work code abatement, and they're averaging 120 to 160 cases currently. So to resolve a lot of these, which typically goes to the administrative hearings officer, we just don't have the time to get there.
So we have anybody else? Dave.
Dean, and then we'll go to.
Well, I didn't have really a legal question or comment, but I think I recall hearing maybe years ago that you can contract for inspectors for doing inspections. Is that true, or is that
Like third-party inspections?
Yeah, you can contract out, I guess, hiring an inspector on behalf of me rather than through public.
Yes, we actually we had a plumbing inspector that we had hired back in January. We were told not to fill that position. We'd gone through the process, and it was to replace a position that the gentleman had retired. We were told not to fill that position. I think this is what happens when you don't fill those positions.
I was thinking like a temp basis.
It's with inspections, it's very difficult to have a temp. I would say I've been in this industry for a very long time, and I have been an inspector myself, and it is a difficult position to do, and it needs to be, you need to have a lot of time allocated to that, for the fact that it's not like framing a house where you could pick up your hammer and it might take you a couple days to get back into the groove of things, but you're going to do it. Inspections is unique. You need to stay in that routine. It takes 6 months, if not longer, to really get somebody trained. And then when they're in that position, you want them to be in that position, because it is difficult to move from one place to the next without retaining that skill set. So it's important that we get this.
I think it's very small pool of people who get
Yes.
qualified or capable,
Mhm.
former inspectors. Or
Yes, and that's-
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. And we do have we do have individuals out there. We do have staff that we can hire. We have a great group of inspectors. I think if you were to ask most of the contractors in town, they would say that this is the best inspection group that this city's ever had. And they have a great training program. They have a great succession program. I mean, they have this pretty dialed in. It's something you don't really want to mess with. You want to keep those positions there, because it is very difficult to move people in and out of there.
Yeah, thanks. So this is concerning for sure.
Mhm.
And I noticed on the way in, I saw, effective October, we're not open certain mornings, and then effective, for next Wednesday, there won't be any staff available, it sounds like, or
Mhm.
next Friday, maybe it was. So one, just really want to acknowledge this is a huge problem.
Yes.
And so I appreciate your honesty and forthrightness about this, because I feel like, especially in these meetings, we hear, in these meetings and then outside the meetings, we hear two different things, right? We say, if we ask questions about how long things take to get through the system, we say, oh no, we're meeting all of our benchmarks. And then we're also hearing that it takes over 6 months or 9 months to get through this process, which is, as I understand it, above average for a city. Or also hearing, we have great staff, which I agree, we do have great staff. We don't have enough of them. But we also have kind of the frontline staff, and then we don't have, it seems like, folks above them who can really, or at least who are willing to engage in, we need flexibility, or let's expedite this, or, so I keep hearing kind of two different stories, and I think both of them are true to some extent, right? But we have to figure this out, and so I guess I think my question is, short term, is it pay, is it retention, whatever it is, but long term, how can we move past talking about basically Band-Aids or workarounds or whatever it is and get to the fact that this whole system here, the permitting system, needs to be refigured. And I think it gets to your point about software. You can't just buy a software package and expect that's going to solve the problem. You need to, before you even do that, you need to line out what are your requirements, what is the protocol, what are the processes, what is the flow of each of the permit processes, how can we run them in parallel instead of having folks having to come in once and then they come in again and again. There's a lot of kind of system design issues. And as an assembly member, I know that's not our job, right? Like that's not something that we can put in code. We could do that, but then it's not our job to implement that. So I guess partly I just want to express frustration after so many months of hearing this and then seeing just the years of kind of unwillingness from at least some quarters to engage in this conversation in a serious way. But I guess my question is, knowing all of that, knowing you can't solve that, Scott, is it pay? Is there any kind of short-term things that you've talked about or that leadership on the admin side has talked about? Or do we really just go third party at this point?
I don't think third party is your answer at all. I think that we have the structure of something that is very valuable. I mean, go back and look at the 2018 earthquake, and that pretty much explains how quality staff can be implemented and really have an effect on a municipality. The damage done to the buildings was minimal compared to what it could be in other places because our inspection team is strong, our engineering team is strong, and that's a fact. So the issues we have are there's many of them to deal with at once. I think the permit counter and staff is probably or should be our focus right now because of the fact that it does take training to get these people up to speed on how the process works. We need to get to the point where we can start looking at different softwares because this dynamic portal doesn't work. It never hasn't worked since I've been here. It's been an issue constantly. And in my experience, if you have a problem, fix it, right? You don't just continue to use the broken tool over and over again. As far as staff retention, we need to look at increasing pay for some of these positions, making sure that the qualifications aren't so outrageous that we can't even get applicants to apply. We can train people here. That's easy. That's the easy part of it. But we got to get them in the door to do that. And secondly, with the inspections group, you need to give them the manpower they need and let them do their job. Because they have a system that works and it's proven, and the 2018 earthquake proves it for us. So don't mess with that inspection staff. Let them do their thing. They have great leaders. They have a great system set up. And right now, when we're short-staffed like this, for instance, the plumbing group, our lead plumbing inspector licenses all the plumbers and HVAC techs in this town. That's on top of him going out and doing inspections when he can and organizing and leading his group of individuals. So when we get short-staffed like this, it's a huge impact. And it's a huge impact to the construction industry. And it's expensive for them, extremely expensive. So when I say dollar waiting on a dime, how much is one person's job for a year for this department compared to how much construction loss each day that we aren't able to show up and have a single inspection?
Carl?
Yeah, so a couple things. One, it's very frustrating about M4 and the software because we've been working with that program for years. I don't know how much money we've dumped into it, which is extremely frustrating because we're still pushing paper. And that has been a significant concern. I tell you, every Anchorage home builder meeting is how are we doing with that? And it's the same. Yeah, it's still broken. And it's not like this isn't being done successfully other places in the United States. We don't do things unique up here. We might have some processes, but it's not like they're putting the roof on before the foundation. right? It proceeds you build a building the same, there's different seismic codes or things, but the overall premise and the time and the process of constructing the property, it should be, it shouldn't be rocket science for us to have to recreate something so that we can take a lot of that burden off the permanent counter. I know that perhaps one of the breakdowns is that you get a software, but we don't have an IT person out here. We don't have somebody whose full-time job is to make sure that system is functioning. That might be it. It's just like it'd be just like our snow. It'd be like our Department of Transportation and our vehicles not having mechanics, right? So inevitably something's going to go down if we don't have the support to fix and work on it. So I think if we're going to look at investing in a functional software, we also need to look at investing in IT support to make sure that you have someone to keep the tires inflated.
Can I jump in here real quick on
Yeah,
that?
but go ahead, yes.
The important aspect of that is that IT doesn't need to dictate what works for us. The permit counter and the inspection staff is what needs to dictate that software, and IT needs to support us. And I want to make sure that's clear, because we need to get something that works for these folks and works for the public, and that should not be dictated by IT. That should come from the industry and from the folks in this building.
I concur wholeheartedly. And so maybe that's another, we'll put that on an agenda as far as and see who we need to recruit at a future CDC meeting about that program and what we can do, because if we're having that much turnaround in permitting, anything that's been done more than once, there should be a system for it. And it should be easy to automate for the most part, with minor exceptions. And so less emphasis on human intervention, particularly when it comes to uploading necessary documents to get the permits going.
And
now,
can I just chime in real quick too, is N4 is citywide,
Yeah.
and I think one of the things I'd like to point out as well is the fact that we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here and change everything for everybody. N4 can be used by other groups. We're not saying that they need to change that. It works for other groups, but for the inspection staff and the front counter, there are options out there that'll work better.
Yeah. Well, one thing, and I say this often, I've noticed, is that we love here throughout all the municipality, we love to fall in love with bad decisions because it took us a long time to make them. Okay, and so that is, it's like my dad and his old boat Bayliner he held on to for years, and he was always working on it, never fishing, but it was like, okay, well, at what point do you just say you should just come to terms that it's never going to do what you want it to do? So, excellent. So the next thing I want to go to is we have a special inspector pre-approval program, correct?
Yes.
And is that utilized? Is there any way we can expand that in order to help incorporate? It's not third party, but I mean, it kind of is.
I think our special inspection program is pretty good. We have a pretty good relationship with the special inspection groups out there. So far I haven't really heard any issues with it. I don't know about expanding.
Well, that's what I'm looking at. If it's successful and it's working, is there a way that we can grow within that to fill some of the
Field inspections is something that it takes years to be able to have the knowledge to do that. And you need to work in the industry to be able to understand the applications involved in it. To me, the system we have now, I don't think you can put a third-party inspector or a special inspector and take that person and replace a municipal inspector with that. Does that make sense? You can't. They're not interchangeable, so to speak. The inspectors we have, the reason why they're good is because they've been through a training program. They have spent years in the field. They've run their own businesses. They have done this for years. They have trained. And these people that are in the special inspections program, they don't necessarily have that training. They have a completely different training. They have welding certifications. It's much more specified.
Yeah, and I give you a little bit of pushback on that, admittedly, Scott, because what you're saying is the people that work for you, that you got from private sector with experience and pulled them in the muni, and the minute they work for the muni, they're somehow now more qualified, but they were qualified enough to hire. But if we're getting the employees from the same pool of qualified individuals.
But you're not.
But then everybody that works for you is unqualified.
No,
Because they
that's-
came from the same, if we're both cooking steaks at our house, we both go to Costco and buy our meat, and you say he's got a lower quality of meat because we get it from the same pool of resources, I'm just
Special
not, I'm not
inspectors
entirely convinced.
are inspecting soils. You know, they're inspecting bolts. They're inspecting ceiling grids. They're inspecting specific installations, not the overall installation. That's the difference. Our mechanical inspectors, our electrical inspectors can go in and look at everything, right? We don't have really special inspections for electrical, so maybe that's not a good example. But for instance, soils, they go in and the special inspector is checking soils, right? That's fine and dandy, but they're not gonna be the person that's gonna go check to make sure you have your hurricane clips on your trusses. That's not their forte, that's not what they've been trained in. They're trained in a specific field, and that's what special inspections are used for.
Okay.
They don't have the broad general understanding of what our inspectors do. So it's apples and oranges right now.
Okay, so special inspections is a very focused, limited
Yes,
aspect.
absolutely.
Okay, so then how do we get the certifications? Because it's just like, to me, it's just like snow removal, right? We gotta get the streets plowed. And when the streets don't get plowed, the public, we know they show up. So what do? When we don't have enough plow truck drivers, what does the municipality do? Do we just work them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and just say do it again? Or do we say, we need third-party contractors to do in a temporary basis to fill this gap? And how do we create that? Because ultimately, it's about how we serve the public, not how we protect a specific group of individuals' job.
And we have that ability to do that. We have the people waiting in the wings, but we don't.
We'll see if we-
We're told not to fill those staffing positions, so.
We have a few other members on the stack coming on the phone. Oh, yeah, we have a few other members, but before then, I just wanted to not go far away from a point. You mentioned budgeted for, these are the two action items I heard, budgeted for versus allowed to hire. Are the positions that you're describing, do they remain budgeted for? Or is there a budget problem with respect to those positions on the books in the first place, separate from the actual hiring?
You know, I don't have any specifics on the front counter because that's not my world. I know that I believe we were budgeted for a plumbing inspector, but told not to hire, but I have to double check with our admin on that.
Okay, so if anyone on that front of staffing, with respect to the question of budgeted for, needs the practice of the hiring, we're trying to get a sense of where that bottleneck is, where the pressure is coming from to do one or the other, to not hire or whatnot. And from my understanding, we have, at least from my perspective, in our current budget, have made sure that all of the positions that were going to be not funded in the budget are funded. And the question is about the hiring question. So, because we've also heard that gap of staffing in various units that, from our vantage point, are able to hire because the funding is in place. So it raises a question, and it may just be where that question needs to be answered from to us. What is the driving force behind the lack of hiring, or how does a command come down the chain to say, don't hire for those positions when we are budgeting for them and we also know they're valuable and needed to be hired? So it's an interesting question. Maybe it's coming through you, but the decision-making is coming from another place. And we're hearing from the higher levels of decision-making, recruitment, retention, we're all working together. So it raises some real serious questions for this body to recognize that we want a budget to be hired so that we can have an effective season and effective workforce. So I just wanted to capture that, because you mentioned that before. Dean? And then
Yeah, thank you. I just wondered if a lot of the issues that you mentioned, the permitting process, inspections and so forth, were they related to some of the, I guess, recommendations from Brendan Adams report that we had, I guess, a few years ago. And I'm sort of vaguely remembering the Brendan Adams report. And I think some members here, it predates their time. But John Ludington, who's former chair of this committee, was a good advocate of looking at the report and implementing its recommendations. But I can't remember if some of those are related to the issues you're explaining today. And we should maybe revisit Ben and Adams' report, and probably staff here reviewing that report and stuff have implemented.
You know, I'm not super familiar with the Bend Adams report. I do know one thing I remember is that they did recommend that the building official be not at the discretion of the mayor. I think that's a good call. I think we need to have some foundation and some leadership that is consistent in this building. And you know, you look at the amount of acting people in positions, I think that's concerning to me. I think leadership is a value that really drives quality, and it is important to have that leadership here, regardless of who sits in the office. We try 100% all the time to be just focused on our jobs here in the building and not get wrapped up in politics, and having that leadership and consistency would be valuable. And just put faith in the people in this building that they know how to do their jobs. I mean, we've been doing construction, most of us in this building, our entire lives. And so, you know, when you bring up, oh, can't we just make a third-party inspector or somebody? No, you can't. They can't do the jobs that these people do. They're not qualified. They're not licensed. So give us the staff we need and allow us to do our jobs so we can do it effectively.
And just for the record, if Dave or anyone else would like to chime in, just make sure you just ping us, so we want to hear from your voices as well. I know Member Brawley had your hand raised.
Yeah, just two brief things. I'm glad Mr. Gates brought up the Ben and Adams report. That is one of the actions in the strategic plan draft, and for that reason. So it's not, and again, not because the Assembly is going to do that, but we are going to continue to advocate for that to be done. Because again, it's not our role, right? We can make sure the positions are funded. We can give policy direction. That's about all we can do in that particular field. But I'm going to keep bringing it up. In the meantime, the other thing is one bit of good news. Hopefully, hopefully we'll get the good news that we've received the grant. But just to remind folks, the HUD Pro grant, with pathways to removing obstacles. The whole idea around that was to help local governments who are already in the process of trying to make development easier, get more housing, to give them more resources to help do that. So one of the projects that's proposed in there is basically doing not purchasing the software itself, but lining out kind of what the requirements for good software would be, and doing, I think, that process design, hopefully, like using the flow chart you would use through that software process. So I don't know when we're going to hear back. Obviously, again, the Assembly's not the one who implements those grant funds, but that is one positive thing. So hopefully we can bring in some resources. Realistically, it probably would have to be contracted out, but to be able to help think through that system redesign from the software perspective.
I know something for the dynamic portal. I think our role is someone recommends what they want, we appropriate. So something that's covered maybe. And then on the special inspectors, so I kind of get that. You probably know for your soil inspector, you probably know everyone in the state that is capable of that. But when you say hire, are you talking about hiring as a municipal employee or hiring as a contractor for that third party?
I think we're getting confused in the minutia of this stuff. Right now, our inspection program is a program used for specific fields, and these people are trained in those absolute specific fields. They're not trained in the broad general scope of things, right? And then we have our inspection group here for the municipality, and those individuals come from field businesses. They've done this in their entire life. We have a position, plumbing specifically, at Code Abatement, that we have staffing shortages. We draw from pools of individuals that work in the municipality, local unions, local industry, and we pull from those groups qualified individuals to work for the inspection group. And does that kind of answer?
As a municipal employee or
as a municipal employee? Yes. No,
okay.
Not as a contractor.
Do you have that option? If you have,
No, I think it's best to keep the inspections the way it is, because they're non-biased. They go in and they look at things based upon public safety. They're a public servant and they inspect from that public servant standpoint. And that's, in my opinion, the way it should be.
Fox not in the hen house.
Correct.
I want to acknowledge that Member Volan is on the phone with us today as well. So he's joined us along the conversation about 5 or 10 minutes ago. And so I just want to make sure we all had that on the record as well. The opening of this conversation basically is, are we ready for our season? And to what extent are we ready for our peak season coming in, right? And it seems that we're hearing similar challenges that people have been talking about for quite some time. Staffing, filling the positions, bottlenecks between the discretion of downtown and the discretion of the departments where people are being hired. We've also heard this call for get people in the door, because on-the-job training is something that is valuable to our staff, and that might be an area of exploration with respect to the pipeline building with the school district and some of the changes that are happening for building a pipeline, a workforce pipeline. But on-the-job training is a valuable element, and I heard that clearly articulated today. It raises the question of the level of training that our staff has, and this question of what is the cost of worker turnover in these departments, right? Because, and then it raises the questions of what are the expectations that we have to have fulfilled to meet the demands of the peak season, right? So how far behind are we going to fall on projects that may be coming down because of these staffing and hiring challenges? I think that those are really the core elements that I'm hearing about. I know there are remedies that different folks may have, but I just want to get to a sense of what is our operational number today? Are we 25% ready to go? It sounds like maybe if that much at all, but that goes to year-over-year comparisons of where we are versus off-season, on-season, a good year, when we're all ships are working and we're fully staffed as best as that has looked in the past. What is the amount of workload difference? What's the delta to where we are today? I think those questions are really important for this body as we focus on community and economic development. And we're talking about growth of housing and all of these elements, but can we actually grow to the demands we need based on the staffing we have today? And it seems like the answer may be no, and there's a challenge there. So I just wanted to be clear, make sure that I'm articulating these things. If I missed anything, please shoot them out so we can catch them on the record.
Well, if I could just finish with just painting the picture a little bit. Currently, right now, we have 3 active people in our permit staff, 2 front counter, 1 is a lead. The lead is leaving in January. We'll be down to 2. One of the 2
What should it be?
Should be.
That's going to give me a barometer there.
Yeah. We should have at least 4 permit staff up front with the lead, and that's the bare minimum. One of our permit staff right now, we are trying to move her into a higher position. Again, if we get denied that position by moving her up because she may fall short of the qualifications, she's an excellent staff member. And if we're unable to move her up, I could see her leaving as well. So we'll be down to 1 permit staff. This is the most critical time to get people in the door. We did have a very good applicant that we are going to post a position for permit, or for our cash cage at the permit counter, and that should be offer should be given to her. I think has been given to her, or should be given to her any day now. And we do have positions out there for permit techs currently. So we'll see during the hiring process in the next couple weeks. Hopefully we can get a couple more people in the door, but yeah, we desperately need to get our staff in and hired because it takes months to train people, and we all know when the building season starts and it's right around the corner. So
just a quick question: are all these positions in the AMEA union already non-represented?
I think they are AMEA, but are they all? Yeah.
So just to be clear, the question was, are all of these positions in a AMEA bargaining unit? Represented by?
Did you have?
Represented by the union or non-represented employees.
Okay.
It depends on which rules you're going to look at for the process.
I want to, Dave Whitfield with planning. I just want to second what Scott is trying to say. I think, our permit counter is incredibly critical to us being able to process permits efficiently. And while I don't oversee that section, I do see the challenges in retention there. I've heard it's pay, it's flexibility, it's all of those things. I don't want to bash on HR. They do a great job of what they have, but getting these candidates in, getting them interviewed and hired and trained is incredibly difficult. For example, my office experiences a lot of the same things that Scott is bringing to light, but at a lesser extent. We had a planning position in my office that we tried to hire for 8 months. And finally got a qualified applicant. I hired them, and they're not starting until May. I'm willing to sit on this position until May so that we can have and bring in a qualified applicant. This is the challenge that we have with every one of these positions now. We, 5-6 years ago, we're getting 25 to 30 applicants for one position. Positions are sitting out there continuously with no applicants. So it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge, and I don't know what the answer is, if it's increasing pay or providing more flexibility, but there's an issue out there for sure. And Scott has a real challenge at the permit counter that needs to be addressed.
Well, and it's not just the employment part, because I haven't had to go in and pull a permit in some time, but I don't know if you still go to counter and then you gotta pay and you gotta go somewhere else and you're taking your paperwork. And so, I mean, even just the logistics of it wasn't very efficient. And I know our contractors have been asking for us to create, at least the individuals that are pulling lots of permits and doing this stuff frequently, creating a credit account where they can just pay once a month or whatever it is, so they're not caught up in these cycles each time. Because, I mean, if we have a contractor that's obviously been in business for a long time and they're pulling multiple permits a month on different stuff, it would totally make sense that we just, in order to expedite that so they're not backing up the cash counter, what do a cash out, or where do I put my check, or what does that look like, we just allow them to charge it. It's on there. You know who the people are. They put it on their account, they bill it, and they pay it with a credit card at the end of the month. That way we can get people through faster. So I think it's not just a point, but what do we look at our systems? Because anything we've done, again, more than once, is obviously something that we can do to improve that, and making sure that you guys are empowered to do those things, and that bureaucracy is not in the way of you being efficient. So, thank you.
Yeah, on that point, I'll just articulate, it sounds like I heard 2 challenges with the hiring, and let me make sure I put that clarity on the record. Hiring in the first place, and I also heard challenges moving up, which sounds like there is intra challenges between being able to move people from one job or position to another position, but similar challenges to why the hiring is, which is it's regulations or requirements that supersede the discretion of the direct supervisor or the department. It sounds like, is that something that I've captured as well?
Yes.
Okay. I'm interested in those models. To Member Brawley's point, we're not the executors or the implementers, but we can highlight, we can educate, and and I know at least the new HR director is learning municipal operations, but they're interested in learning and figuring things out. So if there are better practices that could be articulated to us and through us, that would be helpful. Because it also seems like there's this centralization of discretion is an interesting element with respect to these questions of hiring and the operation. And I hear from all of the different departments fundamentally that there's, downtown will say, I don't know what the departments are doing. And the departments will say, I don't know what downtown is doing. And so there's a bottleneck between both the communications and the requirements that are necessary. So I just want to put that on the record with exceptionally clarity for us. Anyone else would like to speak into this conversation? Please just come forward, or loud enough so we can catch your name on the record. Just identify yourself and offer some
Dan
comments.
Hall's in the queue.
Was it?
Dan.
And then we have member Volan in the queue to ask.
Real quick, you actually about 5 minutes ago. Mr. Volan, you're recognized.
Okay, great. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fantastic. So I guess my question is, what is the interim solution? What's the backup plan for construction season 2024? And I think when it comes to, with the background of a housing shortage and what I think the Assembly, most of my colleagues would call a housing crisis, I think just today in the permitting center, I'm not there, but I've seen photos on social media that says, there's only going to be one permitting person available on this day and then none on the 22nd. And I know we're in the holidays, but, with other departments that we have sort of deemed essential, the business of the municipality cannot continue without their work. For instance, the controller's office, they've had to essentially outsource some of their work and hire contractors. And while I don't like the idea of that, I wish that we had talented, capable people working as municipal employees full time and getting those benefits and being able to have that consistency in our workforce. I'm not comfortable with just saying, we don't know, we're going to try to figure it out. We're going to try to hire people, but that could take, even if we did find somebody to hire, that could take till late spring, early summer. And so in order to avoid a backlog and in order to kind of keep things moving, is there a proposal to contract out for some of this work? I know we had looked at previously an ordinance to allow independent structural review that ended up not moving forward. Do we need to do a more tailored version of that? Do we need to do that on a contract basis? I want to hear, I guess, from the department, what is their proposed solution to the Assembly?
Can I comment on that?
Yeah, Scott will take the first bite at that apple.
Contracting out this work would be an absolute disaster. I mean, we're the only ones qualified in town to do this. Where are you going to find a third-party contractor to take over the work? We need to put the money where the expertise is, which is this department. We're not talking about just because we can't man something right now, we shouldn't do it. Give us the resources to do our job. That's what we're asking. We don't need to third party something just because we don't have the tools that we need to finish the job. Give us the tools to finish our job.
Chair, can I briefly follow up?
Yes, Member Volan.
Thank you. Succinctly, could you just one more time summarize what those tools are that would allow you to perform your essential work?
I would say give us the tools where we can hire a permit staff, make things easier for us. We need to get permit staff in so we can get them trained. We need to fully fill our inspection positions so we can accommodate the building industry. And we need to focus our attention on getting new software to where it not only makes the permit counter an easier place to train people, it also is allowing the industry to have an easier process when they come in to get a building permit.
Okay, and what is your expected timeline for a realistic timeline for those changes that you're suggesting?
I can't put a timeline to this. We're in the discussion of the problems right now. If I knew that I was going to have the resources available to fix the problems, then I could give you a timeline.
Okay, well, I guess that's what I'm asking, and I'll leave it here and let others comment. But I think what would be helpful for my colleagues and I is some type of memo that would outline, assuming, okay, here's the tools that we need, here's the funding that we need, and assuming that those things were met, what is a timeline for implementation? Because I think it's one thing just to say, here are the challenges, but it's another thing to actually have a goal and address those things. And I think we would want to partner with you. And I'm not, I certainly ask this not to be adversarial, but I want to empower you to do your work. But even more than I want that, I want us to be able to be building housing in the 2024 construction season. So anything you can submit to the Assembly in terms of how we can support you, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just for record keeping, are there any members of the public here with us today that is expecting to speak at the end of the meeting? Any members of the public online that's expecting to speak at the end of the meeting? Okay, cool. So no, let's just count them now, not at the end of the meeting. So
it's 6 minutes and we'll have 10 minutes.
great. So 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
3 minutes?
3 minutes.
Introduce yourself.
Well, okay. My name is Larry Emily, Circle Plumbing and Heating. My family's owned this company since 1969. We do a lot of work in the municipality. I wanted to, going back to my 3 minutes, I don't think I'll get 3 minutes, but what I wanted to say about efficiency, like, it's not ran real efficient for now. I mean, the permitting area. It's hard to get permits for us. Like, water heaters, and that stuff's easy to do now. Getting a higher permit, getting a harder permit, we've got to bring a permit, or we've got to bring a set of drawings in to get a permit. It's very hard. It's almost pointless. Like, it's not even fun to come here to do what we need to do to be able to work. So what I came here to talk about was inspections, because right now, what's happening to my company, it's hurting us. So we will call an inspection. I just did this the other day. Call an inspection on a Thursday for a Tuesday morning inspection. So we give it a few days. Tuesday morning rolls around. We get a phone call that says, sorry, can't make it. Too busy. Okay, that's not going to work for us, because in plumbing, we have to take things apart. We got to pressure test things. We have to completely isolate the system. And all of a sudden, and so there's other trades. There's an insulator that has to insulate our piping after. The sheetrockers are trying to bury us and cover the walls. I mean, there's a lot of things going on. All of a sudden, I can't make it. And it's like the most depleting thing when we're trying to do something. And I'm talking commercial. I'm not talking a residential homeowner water heater inspection. I'm talking a large project when we are depending on the city to come out there and inspect it. We cannot have it. I can't speak for other trades. I'm speaking strictly plumbing. You can't have it where it's like maybe tomorrow, we're too busy. It really makes us angry. It makes us like, why? Like, why can brand X get an inspection and we can't get an inspection today? There's been other projects where, earlier this summer, had a project where an underground inspection. Now, underground inspection is, there's dirt everywhere. Open trenches. Call for an inspection. We need an inspection to be able to cover the dirt or cover our piping. So we're gonna make it to where everyone can go back to work. It took 3 days to get that inspection. I sent guys home at noon because at that point in time, there's nothing to do. So my guys went home at noon, 3 days waiting for an inspection to happen. And it's completely inefficient. That's all 3 minutes I get.
Did we have any questions? You made good points. When I was a pipe fitter, we'd have to section stuff off and either do air for 2 hours without loss of a single pound or 24-hour hydro test. And so if they didn't show up, then we'd have to leave the system down.
Correct.
Connect it, put it all together, all the drain down my section, redo this again, and hopefully show up the next time. And the labor and cost expense, not just the time, but thank you.
And then Brandon, will you go?
Oh, yeah, I think I think I know the vague answer to this, but do you have any, can you quantify kind of the time cost, impacts of this?
I mean, it depends on really what type of inspection we're trying to get. If we're having to tear apart a system and wait for you guys to I mean, it's depending on the building, depending on what type of construction we're doing, it could be anywhere from 2 hours to 6 hours. And if we have to, wait, and it's not, it's an expensive thing for us if we do not get an inspection the day that we ask for it.
I'm gonna use a lame plumbing metaphor and just say like when the pipe is clogged in one place, right, the water can't flow. So I think what you're talking about is a similar thing, right? You've got those choke points and bottlenecks.
And just add on, if you show up and you're not ready, they still charge you for the inspection. Like they still
Absolutely.
they come out. I mean, they still bill out and they're like, sorry you didn't pass. You get billed again. But if they cancel at the last minute, they can't do it. It's sorry it cost you several $100s, if not thousands.
Right, so I want to make another point. I was doing a project at APU this summer. We were on a timeline. The construction we had a specific date we had to be done by. We called in for plumbing for a mechanical final, and that day was like, whether it be the August 20th or whatever it was, we called in August 19th. Inspection said, sorry, we can't get to it. So now we got the 20th, which is my day to turn over this building. Didn't happen until the 22nd. There was massive financial loss in that thing, had the owner not have understood what was going on.
And I'm sure you have hundreds of stories like that. We got 3 minutes, we got one person left, so we're only scheduled for 10:30. So.
Brandon, introduce yourself.
My name is Brandon McGuire. I'm a business agent with Huey Local 367 Plumbers and Steamfitters, and I represent the inspectors here in the building. My role in coming in was actually because I reached out in regards to the permitting department, knowing the trials that they have there in general, but more so when they're understaffed. One of my members reached out to me, explained the problem, so that's when I reached out to the assembly in general. But I can tell you from the standpoint of having a plumbing license and having to come in and deal with the permitting department, because they also deal with licensing. And just like Mr. Emily was talking about, it can be difficult. And I think in part it's because they also have to deal with us. And a lot of times we can be cranky, cantankerous people when we come in because we're mad because we haven't met our timelines, or we need to do this, or we need to do that. And so you have people that are working front counter, like Mr. Campbell have referenced, who are essentially customer service representatives who have to deal with, in part, some nasty people sometimes. You say you work for me, do your job. I do think that Mr. Campbell brings up some good points in that these positions do need to be fully staffed. And they have to be staffed year-round. You can't cut them short during the slow season because of the training that is involved in these. And more so, our inspectors. And to that extent, it was less than 2 years ago that we cut 1/3 of the plumbing inspectors that we had. We literally laid off 2 plumbing inspectors. And we said, we don't need them. Magically, they got hired back within a 12-month period. But when you have, to speak to Mr. Campbell's comment about these departments need to be able to operate outside of the administration at the time, because regardless of who the administration is, if the administration comes in and makes changes to things that are and have been in place for decades and run smoothly, it can create a ripple effect that will cause years of what will be distress in these departments. And I think we're seeing it now, and I think that it does need to be addressed. And to be very clear, the not filling of positions is not synonymous to this building. It is union-wide. And I can tell you that it creates issues everywhere, whether it's here, whether it's water treatment, whether it's, you name it, positions need to be filled. That they're budgeted for and they're being sat on, and I can tell you it's not the department sitting there. I can tell you right now when you talk about HR saying, I don't know what's going on with the department saying, I can tell you I talked to the departments, not just this one, I talked to the other departments. They want to fill the positions. they don't have the ability to fill the positions. It's outside of their control. Thank you.
Thank you.
You filled it all up.
Great conversation, David.
No, just real quick, I think one thing that might help in terms of hiring practice is giving the departments more discretion in recruitment. I think that's a good deal. If we had the ability to evaluate the candidates, the candidate pool, and have more discretion, I think it would help.
I want to thank the members of the staff. Final comment?
I was gonna say, most places, you put in your criteria, HR kicks out those that don't meet the minimum criteria, you get everything else. The fact that they're evaluating each of they're gonna hire just like for.
Well, they're looking for, a lot of times they're looking for keywords because they're not subject matter experts. They don't know these candidates that we do. So if we had more discussion, I think we would.
Let's continue the conversations offline. We'll adjourn now at 10:31. Thank you, everybody.